The impossible failure. The Zephyrian Institute of Cosmic Engineering had never failed a student incorrectly. Not once in 800 years of operation. The crystalline spires that housed the galaxy's most brilliant minds gleamed with the pride of absolute precision. Every calculation was perfect. Every assessment was flawless. Every grade was earned and deserved. Marcus Chen sat in the sterile white chamber, staring at the holographic display that showed his final project grade. A bold, pulsing red F floated before his eyes like a mockery of everything he had worked toward for the past 3 years. Professor Veltar, a towering Zephyrian with skin like polished obsidian and 4 arms that moved with mechanical precision, reviewed the evaluation one final time. His species had built their entire civilization on order, structure, and mathematical perfection. The Institute was their crowning achievement. Student Chen Veltar's voice resonated through the chamber's acoustic dampeners. Your atmospheric processor design violates 47 core engineering principles. The Academic Council has reviewed your submission unanimously. The grade stands. Marcus looked up from the display, his brown eyes meeting the professor's crystalline blue ones. But did you test it? Did anyone actually run the simulations? Testing was unnecessary, replied Councilmember Thrix, a spider-like arachnoid whose 8 legs clicked against the floor as she approached. Your design calls for atmospheric mixing at unstable pressures. Your calculations use non-mathematical frameworks. Your entire approach contradicts 8 centuries of proven methodology. The other council members nodded in agreement. There was Culver, a gaseous being contained in a sophisticated suit, whose species had mastered atmospheric sciences millennia ago. Beside him stood Dr. Nexus, a cybernetic entity whose race had digitized their consciousness to achieve perfect logical thinking. Finally, there was Elder Wisdom, an ancient tree-like being whose species had been manipulating planetary atmospheres since before humans had discovered fire. The Zephyrian system has produced successful atmospheric processors for over 300 worlds. Elder Wisdom's voice rustled like wind through leaves. Your chaotic approach shows a fundamental misunderstanding of cosmic engineering principles. Marcus stood up, his movements seeming crude and unpredictable compared to the elegant precision of his alien instructors. What if the system is wrong? The chamber fell silent. The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Impossible, Dr. Nexus replied, his digital voice carrying absolute certainty. The system has been tested, refined, and perfected across multiple civilizations. It cannot be wrong. Marcus gathered his belongings and walked toward the exit. At the threshold, he turned back. You never answered my question. Did you test it? The door sealed behind him with a soft hiss. Outside in the corridor, Marcus found his roommate, Kira Okonkwo, waiting for him. The linguistics major had been studying the communication patterns of 17 different species, but she could read human expressions better than any universal translator. That bad? She asked. They failed me without even testing the design, Marcus said, walking beside her toward their dormitory pod. 800 years of never being wrong, and they won't even consider the possibility. Maybe they're scared, Kira suggested. Your design is pretty radical. I saw you working on it. You were pulling from chaos theory, weather pattern analysis, even social dynamics. That's not how they think here. That's exactly why it might work, Marcus replied. They see chaos as failure. We see it as opportunity. 3 days later, the emergency alarms echoed through every corridor of the Institute. Marcus was in his room, packing his belongings for the journey back to Earth, when the announcement crackled through the communication system. All students and faculty report to emergency stations. Critical atmospheric failure detected on planets Kepler-4 for 2b, Proxima Centauri C and Wolf 1061c. Standard intervention protocols are now in effect. Marcus dropped his clothes and ran to the nearest observation deck. Through the massive transparent aluminum windows, he could see the frantic activity in the Institute's command center. Dozens of beings from different species worked at holographic displays, their movements no longer precise and elegant, but desperate and urgent. The 3 planets in crisis were all previous success, stories of Zephyrian atmospheric engineering. Their atmospheres had been carefully balanced using the Institute's proven methods. Now, all 3 were collapsing simultaneously. Professor Velter appeared on the observation deck, his forearms moving in agitated patterns as he coordinated with off-world teams. "The atmospheric processes are failing in cascade," he announced. To the gathering crowd of students, each planet's system is destabilizing at an exponential rate. We have perhaps 72 hours before total atmospheric collapse. Marcus watched as teams of experts implemented emergency protocols. Every solution was textbook perfect, every calculation flawless, every intervention precisely timed, and every single attempt failed. 12 hours passed, then 24. The crisis deepened. Kira found Marcus in the observation lounge at hour 36. Still watching the failing rescue attempts. "You know something, don't you?" she said, sitting beside him. "My design," Marcus said quietly. "It wasn't built for perfect conditions. It was built for chaos, for systems in collapse. You think it could work. I think it's the only thing that could work. Their systems are too rigid. When something goes wrong, they can't adapt. They can only follow the protocol, even when the protocol is failing." Kira stood up. "Then we need to tell them. They won't listen. They already proved that. People are going to die, Marcus. 3 entire worlds." Marcus looked at his friend, then at the desperate activity in the command center below. He made his decision. The walk to the command center felt like the longest journey of his life. The chamber was in controlled chaos, if such a thing was possible in Zephyrian space. Every council member was present, along with emergency teams. From a dozen different worlds. Student Chen, Professor Velter, noticed him immediately. "You should be preparing for departure. The Institute is suspending all non-essential activities." "I want to help," Marcus said simply. "Unless you have suddenly mastered atmospheric engineering in the past 72 hours. There is nothing you can contribute here," Council Member Thrix replied sharply. "What if I told you I designed a system specifically for this kind of failure?" The chamber gradually fell quiet as Marcus's words spread through the room. Dr. Nexus was the first to respond. "Your design was evaluated and rejected. It is fundamentally flawed. It's fundamentally different," Marcus corrected. "Your systems work perfectly in perfect conditions. But these aren't perfect conditions anymore. Your rigid protocols can't adapt to chaos. Mine can." Elder Wisdom's ancient voice carried across the chamber. "You ask us to trust untested theory while 3 worlds face extinction. I ask you to test something new while your tested theories are failing 3 worlds into extinction," Marcus replied. Professor Veltar's forearms stopped moving. In the sudden stillness, he asked the question that would change everything. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus stepped forward into the center of the chamber, surrounded by beings whose civilizations had mastered the stars, while humanity was still learning to make fire. Give me one simulation run, one test of my design against the current crisis. If it fails, I'll leave quietly and never speak of this again. If it works, ... If it works, Professor Veltar said slowly, it would mean our perfect system has been imperfect for 800 years. Your perfect system, Marcus said, looking around at the faces of species who had conquered physics, chemistry, and biology itself, has never faced anything like this before. Maybe it's time to try something imperfect that might actually work. The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Council Member Thrix clicked her 8 legs against the floor in the arachnoid gesture of reluctant agreement. One simulation, she said, but when it fails, as logic dictates it must, you will acknowledge the superiority of established methodology. Deal, Marcus said, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement. As the simulation parameters loaded into the Institute's massive computational matrix, Marcus felt the weight of 3 worlds resting on his unconventional ideas. The design that had earned him an F was about to face the ultimate test. The holographic display showed 3 dying planets, their atmospheres spiraling toward collapse despite every perfect solution the galaxy's best minds could devise. In a few hours, Marcus would discover whether human chaos could save what alien perfection could not. Asterisk. The system overhauled the simulation ran for 4 hours and 37 minutes. During that time, Marcus watched his chaotic atmospheric processor design interact with the crisis parameters, while the greatest minds in the galaxy observed in skeptical. Silenced at the display showed 3 planetary atmospheres in terminal collapse. Standard Zephyrian protocols had failed on all fronts. The rigid, mathematical precision that had worked for centuries was proving helpless against the cascading failures. Then Marcus's design engaged. Instead of fighting the atmospheric chaos, it embraced it, where Zephyrian processors tried to force stability through precise pressure controls. Marcus's system used the instability itself as an energy source. His design didn't impose order on chaos. It found the hidden patterns within chaos and amplified them. Impossible, Dr. Nexus whispered as his digital mind processed the simulation data. The atmospheric pressure on Proxima Centauri C just stabilized, using the planet's own storm systems as regulatory mechanisms. Professor Veltar's forearms moved frantically across holographic controls, double-checking every calculation. Kepler-4 for 2B's toxic gas concentrations are neutralizing themselves through controlled turbulence patterns. This violates everything we know about atmospheric dynamics. Council Member Thrix's 8 legs clicked rapidly against the floor, a sign of extreme agitation in her species. Wolf 1061C is showing complete atmospheric recovery using weather randomization as a stabilization factor. This makes no logical sense, but the simulation didn't care about logic. It cared about results, and the results were undeniable. All 3 planets were not only surviving, but thriving under Marcus's chaotic intervention. Elder Wisdom's ancient consciousness processed the implications faster than the others. If this simulation is accurate, the tree being said slowly, then our fundamental understanding of atmospheric engineering has been ... incomplete. More than incomplete, Kira said from the observation area where she had been watching. It's been wrong about something crucial. You've been designing for perfection in a universe that's fundamentally imperfect. The chamber erupted in heated discussion as beings from different species tried to reconcile what they were seeing with everything they believed they knew. Council member Thrix approached Marcus directly. "Your design should not work," she said, her translator struggling with the emotional complexity of her native language. "Every principle of engineering science says it should fail catastrophically." "Every principle of your engineering science," Marcus corrected gently. "Human engineering developed differently. We learned to work with chaos because we grew up in it. Your species evolved in ordered environments. You built perfection into your thinking from the beginning." Dr. Nexus materialized a holographic interface and began running diagnostic protocols on his own systems. "I am detecting no errors in my processing. The simulation results are mathematically sound, yet they contradict fundamental principles that have governed galactic engineering for millennia." "Maybe," said a new voice from the chamber entrance, "it's time to examine those principles." Everyone turned to see Director Zelthek, the Institute's supreme administrator, entering with a team of emergency coordinators, the ancient Zephyrians. Presence commanded immediate attention from every being in the room. "Director," Professor Veltar said, "we were just analyzing an alternative solution to the atmospheric crisis." "I'm aware of the situation," Zolthek replied, moving to the central display. "I'm also aware that our standard protocols have now been failing for 41 hours. What I want to know is why a failed student's design is showing more promise than 8 centuries of proven methodology." The question hung in the air like a challenge to reality itself. Marcus stepped forward. "Permission to speak freely, Director." "Granted, your system isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. You've mastered engineering for stable, predictable environments. But the universe isn't stable or predictable. It's chaotic, random, and constantly changing. Humans learn to engineering in chaos because that's all we ever had." Director Zelthek's crystalline eyes focused on Marcus with an intensity that made the young human feel like he was being analyzed at the molecular level. "Explain. Your atmospheric processes work perfectly when conditions match their design parameters," Marcus continued. "But when something unexpected happens, they can't adapt. They keep trying to impose the same solution even when it's not working. My design doesn't have fixed parameters. It adapts to whatever it finds." "That sounds like chaos, not engineering," Council member Thrix interjected. "It is chaos," Marcus agreed. "Controlled chaos. We call it emergence. When you have enough simple interactions happening randomly, complex patterns emerge naturally. Those patterns are often more stable than anything you could design deliberately." Elder Wisdom's ancient voice carried new interest. "You're describing biological systems, evolution, natural selection, operating on engineering principles." "Exactly," Marcus said, his excitement growing. "Natural systems don't try to be perfect. They try to be adaptable. They evolve, they respond, they survive by changing. Your engineered systems are like beautiful crystals, perfect in their structure, but brittle when stress exceeds their limits." Director Zolthek activated a communication channel to the emergency response teams. "Update on the real-world crisis. Atmospheric collapse accelerating on all 3 worlds," came the reply. "Estimated total failure in 14 hours. Request permission to implement desperate measures protocols." The director looked around the chamber at the assembled experts, then back at Marcus. "Student Chen, are you prepared to stake 3 billion lives on your chaotic theory?" The weight of the question settled on Marcus like a physical force. 3 billion beings living their lives on 3 different worlds, unaware that their survival might depend on a 19-year-old human who had just failed his final exam. "Yes," Marcus said simply. Then we implement your design immediately. Full authorization, all resources. The director paused. If you're wrong, those deaths will be on your conscience forever. If I'm right, Marcus replied, maybe you'll consider that your perfect system needs some imperfection. The next 8 hours transformed the Institute's command center into something unprecedented in its history. Instead of following established protocols, teams of alien engineers worked to understand and implement Marcus's chaotic design. It required them to think in ways their species had never learned to think. Culver, the gaseous being, had the most difficulty adapting his atmospheric expertise to Marcus's random pressure variations. This goes against every principle of gas dynamics, he complained while programming the implementation parameters. That's the point, Marcus explained patiently. Your gas dynamics work in closed systems. Planetary atmospheres aren't closed systems. They're influenced by solar radiation, magnetic fields, geological activity, even the rotation of the planet itself. All of those variables are chaotic. Dr. Nexus found the adaptation slightly easier because his digital consciousness could process random variables more efficiently than biological minds. I am beginning to understand, he announced during hour 6. Your design treats atmospheric engineering like a living system rather than a mechanical one. Biological engineering, elder wisdom mused. My species has practiced this for millennia, but we never thought to apply it to technological systems. As the implementation neared completion, reports began coming in from the 3 crisis worlds. The first signs were encouraging. Atmospheric readings were stabilizing in some regions, but the real test would come when the system achieved full activation. Hour 7, Proxima Centauri C reported stable pressure readings across its northern hemisphere. Hour 8, Kepler 442b's toxic storm systems began transforming into beneficial weather patterns. Hour 9, Wolf 1061c achieved its first stable atmospheric reading in over 50 hours. At hour 10, Director Zoltek received the message that would echo through galactic history. All 3 worlds report complete atmospheric recovery. The crisis is over. The command center fell silent except for the quiet hum of advanced technology. Marcus sat in a chair that was too large for his human frame, surrounded by beings whose civilizations had conquered the stars, and realized that everything had changed. Student Chen, Director Zoltek said formally, your academic record will be reviewed and corrected. Your final grade is hereby changed from F2. Well, we'll need to create a new grade category for work that transcends existing evaluation criteria. That's not necessary, Marcus said quietly. Oh, but it is, Professor Velter interrupted. Because we have a much larger problem to address. If your chaotic methodology works better than our perfected systems, how many other failed students have we dismissed incorrectly? The question sent a chill through the assembled faculty. Over 800 years of operation, how many brilliant solutions had they rejected because they didn't fit the established patterns? Council member Thrix activated her personal communication device. I'm calling for a complete review of all human student evaluations from the past decade. I suspect we're going to find some very interesting failures. Dr. Nexus was already running preliminary analyses based on statistical modeling. If student Chen's success rate is representative of human problem-solving capabilities, we may have incorrectly evaluated approximately 60% of human submissions. 60%, Elder Wisdom repeated slowly. 60% of human innovations dismissed as failures. Marcus stood up and walked to the main display, which still showed the 3 recovered worlds spinning peacefully in their restored atmospheres. "It's not that you were wrong," he said to the assembled faculty. "It's that you were incomplete. Your systems work perfectly for what they were designed to do. But the universe is bigger than any design can anticipate. So what do you propose?" Director Zoltek asked. Marcus smiled, the expression carrying all the chaotic creativity that had just saved 3 worlds. "I propose we break your perfect system, deliberately, carefully, and rebuild it to include the kind of imperfection that makes things actually work." 6 months later, the Institute announced the most radical educational reform in galactic history. The new curriculum included courses in chaos theory, adaptive engineering, and biological systems thinking. Human students were no longer evaluated on their adherence to established methodology, but on their ability to solve problems that established methodology couldn't handle. The reform became known throughout the galaxy as the Chen Protocol. Within 2 years, every major engineering school had adopted similar programs. Human graduates became the most sought-after problem solvers in known space, not because they could follow perfect procedures, but because they could create solutions when perfect procedures failed. Marcus Chen, the student who had failed his final exam, became the youngest professor in Institute history. His first lecture was always the same. "Today we're going to learn how to fail successfully, because in a chaotic universe, failure is often more valuable than perfect success." The Zephyrian Institute of Cosmic Engineering had never failed a student incorrectly, until they learned that sometimes failure was the most perfect success of all. Asterisk,